I'm going to moderate a really good group. And when I say moderate, if you find me to be a biased moderator of this particular webinar, it's probably going to be a fair criticism, because as I'm saying, we have looked at it very, very carefully, and we think this is a very important project.
I know that the big kind of conversation or question out there is, does this in any way interfere with our economic engine that is the Port of Oakland? And the answer to that is hell no.
And we are as close as we've ever been. We only have a couple of votes to go. And in spite of the fact that we're facing several lawsuits, I think we have plans to hopefully work through that in a positive way. And we think we can realize this incredible vision for Oakland, for the A's, and for the entire Bay Area.
I want to assure you that this project is going to be the most financially responsible sports deal in American history. We learned the hard way from our Raiders deal how a bad deal can be made for the public, and that we can never put our general fund at risk. And Dave said it, but I think it deserves to be said over and over again. The only public financing that is in this project are the taxes that will only be generated if the project itself happens, and they are the direct taxes generated by the project itself.
There's always plenty of naysayers. I was involved in the Giants ballpark way back in the early 1990s, and helped select the site where it is today. And there was plenty of people who said it was the wrong place and it wouldn't do the things we said it would, and I think it exceeded expectations.
What's out there today, anybody can come on out and take a look. It is, in fact, the only use we've been able to find for years now is really these temporary short-term parking and storage. And so that is all activity that can be accommodated elsewhere. There are actually, between the city and the port, hundreds of acres of ancillary uses in the seaport area in general.
My number one goal here was to protect not just the construction jobs that are going to come with this project, because there's going to be about 6,000 construction jobs, but the long-term permanent jobs. And those we're talking about close to 15,000. In fact, I think this project has the most labor support of any other project in the country that's ever been proposed.
There's a lot of paper going back and forth, but from my perspective, I feel like everything is moving in the right direction. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I think the framework is solid, and I think it's very unique. The jobs policy, which is based on the Oakland Army base, which is probably the only community plan that's like that, is certainly in the state of California, maybe the country. And so I think we have the framework set. I think there's still work to be done on the details, but like you said, Mayor, it's happening every day. We're having daily negotiations with the city staff and their legal team. And, we're hoping to have the development agreement voted on as soon as possible, potentially even before the recess this summer, because, time is of the essence to get this project approved and actually built.
We have momentum going now. We know this thing needs to get built. Our lawyers are madly drafting language, pesky lawyers. I'm a recovering one myself. And so really that's going to drive the timeline of when this thing comes to a vote. There are many different pieces. All of them feel like they're falling into place. We will have a big infrastructure grant request out to the federal government that ironically we probably should know about in the early fall, late summer. So that timing might be auspicious. And Dave, when are we going to actually sit in the sunshine? I mean, look at the day outside. Don't you want a Coliseum dog and a Bud Light in your hand and just, watching them round the bases right now? When are we going to get that experience? When is opening day going to be again?
Well, it depends on the lawsuits and all the other moving pieces, but we want to get going as soon as possible and get this ballpark built. And that's why it's incredibly important to get the approvals this year. And then I think we can more properly lay out a date, whether it's 2026, 2027, where we can open the new ballpark. And that's our hope. And, we're obviously putting a lot into making this happen. And your partnership has been incredibly important as part of that.
There's a question Dave, that came up. I was in Seattle the other day, and whenever you go to Seattle and you head in the city from the airport, you can't but notice, the football stadium and the baseball stadium together, and it's lined up right along the port. And the question is, were you looking at what that interaction between the port operations in Seattle and their ballparks when you thought about Howard Terminal and how it might provide some benchmarks or similarities?
We actually visited Seattle and looked at some options. Yeah, I think Seattle is a good model, and it's been extremely successful. And many of the transportation consultants that were working on this project, both for the city and the A's, are familiar with that and actually worked on the Seattle transportation plan that included having mitigations and plans to keep freight separate from pedestrians and people. And, that's a really important part of the seaport compatibility.
The reality is just that Howard has been passed by. There's a ship lay berthing there now from the federal government. Could you put a ship up to that dock today? It's sitting there. Yeah, you could, but would it be any purpose? Would it be economical? Would it be operationally reasonable? No. And that's why the terminal operators left. They asked to get out of a long-term lease. The port ultimately settled and agreed with them on that. And that's why we built mega terminals. That's the future of shipping. Howard is the past of shipping.
Any final words of encouragement or, call to action from the group before we let you move on with your day?
I guess my last thing is, please correct people when they say that this is going to be some theft of taxpayer dollars. This is an incredibly responsible deal that literally takes the money generated by the project itself and invests it in public infrastructure and community benefits, including 3,000 units of housing on the site, of more than 1,000 affordable units on and off the site, public parks, union jobs. This is a great thing for Oakland, but it is very financially responsible.
Our study showed $7.3 billion of economic activity, which is a serious economic infusion for the city of Oakland. We've looked at the project carefully from a number of different angles and found that it has serious positive implications, not only for keeping the A's in Oakland, where we think they absolutely belong, but also as a way to move the city of Oakland to the next phase.